just want to call attention to the fact that we had already started this about the third meeting. If I might say the third or fourth, the fourth meeting, treating the subject of philosophy of science. And we are getting into the deep part, which is the methodology. But as a recap of what we did, we had discussed about the main branches of philosophy and how knowledge is acquired and how this knowledge is interpreted. In other words, we were looking at how we are able to conduct scientific study. The acquisition of knowledge is through either a scientific inquiry or in most cases where those belonging to the Vienna circle as classified as pseudoscience, as fake science, that any science that is not verifiable or any inquiry that is not verifiable is not science. So the discussion, that's where it started. And those Vienna circle guys who were UK scholars had taken this strong position. And over time, the likes of Kuhn and then Karl Popper, who deviated, who were part of them and disagreed with them, had also come out with their principles. And in fact, those guys in the Vienna circle who were the philosophers were actually realists. In other words, they believe that knowledge can only be acquired through verification, and there's a truth that is yet to be discovered. Then we had those at the other side who were the relativists, who also believed that knowledge cannot be that verifiable. Not all things that we verify constitute knowledge, but knowledge in itself can be created from multiple perspectives. In other words, we can co-construct knowledge. So from one perspective to the other. And so these are the two main branches of philosophy of science. And the likes of Karl Popper and the Kuhn brought in the paradigm shift, and he believed that, yes, you can, to an extent, say that some of these knowledge can be acquired through verification, but that is not wholly true. There are times that there are paradigm shifts that changes the tone. An example is COVID-19 that exposed all the medical and the scientific research that people were not able to, these guys were not able to predict that this would happen. Another paradigm which is destructive is AI now. So Kuhn was right by saying that, hey, when there's a new paradigm, there's a new learning. There's a new learning curve, and there's a new, scientific method. So whilst positivism or realism is good, we should not consider it alone, but we should also consider the fact that there are unverified knowledge which are also scientific. That was what Kuhn was saying. And so if you have heard about the post-positivists, they are the guys who defected from these Vienna circle guys. And Kuhn was one. Karl Popper said, rather than verification, I'll go for falsification. But Karl Popper's problem was that he took the same stand, just as the Vienna circle guys, the realists, took, that if the knowledge cannot be falsified, any scientific discovery, if it cannot be falsified, then that study is pseudoscience, it's not science. And that was also problematic. So those guys are the guys who started this post-positivism, that they are positivists, they belong to them, but they disagree. So if you look at the shift between positivism and relativism, which is more of those who believe that common sense should tell you that if you came to the world and you were given birth by something, where did the first human being come from? All right, common sense should tell you that if the air, is blowing, there's something, there's some God that, or some supreme being that created us, and that you don't need verification when you can acquire this thing through reasoning. So between the relativist and the positivist, the like of Kuhn and Popper, who defected, started veering into the middle, and that's what really started the issue of the mixed study, which you have the like of Creswell, who has been the father of mixed study, and that brought another paradigm, right? That is normally called pragmatism, right? But between positivism and relativism, remember, the pragmatism is not cast in concrete. You could have a pragmatist who is more tilted to the positivist view, and that's where Creswell, in his own wisdom, said that these guys, if somebody does that, it means he's doing explanatory sequential mixed method, to mean that there's more quantitative, there's more realism than what? Relativism. And then if somebody is tilted also to that part, which is more of relativism, then that person is doing exploratory sequential mixed method, in terms of research design. And then he came to parallel sequential mixed method, where you are doing quantitative and qualitative together, or convergence, where you want to come out with some form of what we call triangulation. So I'm saying this for us to appreciate the fact that the crux of scientific study or research that we do today is premised on the foundation of what? Philosophy of science. And that, take this thing from me, it is not the fact that we want to discover truth that is important, but the fact that we follow a certain design, systematic inquiry into the discovery of what? Knowledge, into scientific research, that actually builds our curiosity, as well as we being that critical, always in looking at issues from our world point of view. That's what makes you the PhD, that doctor of philosophy of science. That's what it means. All right. And that's why the DBAs do different things. So I just want us to appreciate, this. And I think that the last time we had gone through what is research paradigm, and the purpose of those who joined, we said research paradigm represents the fundamental belief that guides scholarly investigation. And we further said that it includes, or it encapsulates, shared assumptions, concepts, values, and practices that constitutes, now, and take note of this, it encompasses a set of shared assumptions. And the shared assumptions we are talking about here are actually the assumptions that these two groups, or if you can tell, you can say that there are three, these three groups hold: those who are in the middle, those who are the left, and those who are right. All right. And those concept, values, and practices constitute the way of viewing what reality. And that is very, very important. within the academic community. And these paradigms serves as intellectual frameworks. Take note of that. Intellectual framework. It means that when you are conducting any research, whether you are for the positivist or the rationalist, or you are in the middle, there is a framework that you should follow. These are frameworks that has been established, you understand, in theory, in philosophy, for us to use as a methodological approach based on values, based on concepts, based on assumptions, to be able to empower into scientific study. So it's important we note that. And it says that this paradigm serves as intellectual framework that helps researchers determine appropriate questions and order, methodologies and interpretation. Where I want you to take note is that it said, understanding research paradigm is critical to doctoral students as they provide the foundation for methodological choices. Even when you want to choose methodology, it is being dependent on your worldview of what things, all right? And the paradigm selected also influence.
Hello, Doc.
Yes.
We lost you at a point.
All right. But you can hear me now?
We lost you. Yeah, we can hear you. When you said
when I said what?
Paradigm is the framework.
Okay. Oh.
The research paradigm is a framework.
Yeah, so it's on recording, so don't worry. So I'm saying that understanding, this, I did say that there is an intellectual framework. What it means is that all these three groups that we follow, they have their own framework. And which is why most times when we look at your topic, your objectives and all that, we're able to tell you that, hey, you've mixed quantitative with qualitative, or you've deviated from what the standard is. All right. So now where I'm interested in here is, I said the paradigm selected influence every aspect of the research process. Take note. Every aspect of the research process, from question formulation to data interpretation. And without a clear grasp of paradigmic assumptions, researchers risk inconsistency in their approach, potentially undermining the coherence and credibility of their work. And I've said that today, pick any Scopus Index papers. If you pick 10, what we are talking about 8 is flawed. All right? And I'm talking about very high top journals. Okay? People mixing qualitative approaches with quantitative, but they are passed. And you begin to ask yourself why. Okay? And the reason why in our part of the world, especially because of these inconsistencies, people do studies, and then when the industry guys, they come, they don't really even buy into it. The first question they will ask is, what methodology did you use? What is your framework? And that's where they begin to realize that, no, this guy has not done any good work. We also discussed this element of research paradigm, ontology, where we said ontology has to do with how you see reality. So in research, your ontology is either realism or relativism. Okay? Realism or relativism. And then your epistemology has to do with the relationship between you, the researcher, and your ontology. Your ontology is now relativism or realism. So your epistemological view of the world, if you're a quantitative guy, will be realism. Okay, so that's what epistemology is about. So you realize that if somebody says, what's your epistemology, he wants to know whether your worldview, your relationship with the research you are doing, you are coming from what? An outsider view or what? An insider view. So if your relationship is the fact that you are from what? An outsider view, then we say that you are from an epic point of view. You understand? You are outsider. And that is why when we conduct research for the quantitative guide, they use secondary data or they administer questionnaires that they do not detect to the person who is responding from what? An epic point of view. And the epic will be an insider. So when they talk about your epistemological stance, they are talking about whether you are a positivist this time or a rationalist. So ontology, realism, and what? Relativism. Epistemology, positivist, or what? Rationalist. So, these are, some people even say naturalist. And then your axiology. The axiology are a set of what? Rules, ethics, that within the research that you are conducting, it is shaped by what? The researcher. And there we are talking about either being subjective or what? Objective. So your axiology has to do with your subjectivity or your objectivity. And you realize that your axiology, if your epistemology is positivism, and your ontology is what? Realism. Of course, your axiology will be what? Objectivism. You understand? And if it is the other way, if your ontology is what? Relativism, and your epistemology is your rationalist, then your axiology will be what? Subjectivism. So this is something we need to embrace, when we are doing research. And that shapes also what kind of methodology you're going to use. And let me state here that methodology is different from method. Your methodology is how the entire research was conducted, from topic to, your final chapter 5 conclusion, right? But the method are the set of tools you use for your work. It could be your data collection tools. It could be some tools that you use in your sampling, all right? But the methodology is the entire what thing. So people say that when we talk about methods, we are actually talking about chapter 3. But when you talk about methodology, we are talking about the entire work. Some people also believe, that. So we talked about yesterday comparing major paradigms. And if you look at the heading for philosophical stance for quantitative paradigm, interpretivism, and then constructivism. And then for qualitative paradigm, you have positivism and then post-positivism, as we talked about the other time. And the mixed method are either pluralism or pragmatism. Ontology, like I said, you are talking about relativism for qualitative, and then realism for what? Quantitative. And then both, you use the either multiple for both, or like we said, pragmatism could go for it. And the epistemology, like we said, subjective view, which for the qualitative, we said they believe in co-constructing what? Knowledge. And then objective for what? Quantitative. And they use figures, measurable metrics in what? Measuring things. And then for the mixed method goes for what? Both. And then we have the research approach. One is inductive. It's coming from an insider point of view, emic. And then the other one is what? Deductive. That is coming from what? An outsider. And the abductive is what? The mixed method. We talked about that. So we discussed about ontology, what it is, epistemology, what it is, and then axiology. For qualitative, like we said, the philosophical foundation is that your ontology is what? Relativism. Your epistemology is what? Either you are constructivism or what? An interpretivism. All right? And then your axiology, you embrace what? Subjectivism. So, or subjectivity. So take note that these things are very, very, very important. as you move along. For qualitative research, the research designs primarily has to do with one, phenomenology, where you are studying what? You are focusing on the lived experience of people. And then ethnography, where you look at the cultural patterns of what and the belief system of a community or a group. And that could be, if you know the group they call the anthropologists. The other time I was telling you that anthropology is a study that you might want after PhD, you delve into it, because they study about the whole entirety of society and who they are. So we have industrial anthropologists that, really study people's behavior in the workplace and how workplace, the environment shape the lives of what? People. So they do that. And they will have the normal social anthropologists who go around, look at society. There are some that goes into language, how existence of people. And in fact, for most of the studies and scientific discovery that we're able to come by, these anthropologists play significant role, all right, in that. So if you're doing ethnography, then, with anthropology, most of the studies they conduct, they themselves become part of what? The study. And I give you an example of a police, a CID lady who had to marry someone and then live with the person, even give birth, in order to convict the person, because they believe that he had killed, the wife for some years ago. Then we have case studies. Case studies, could be an in-depth study that you are doing for a period. Most qualitative research people do most of them are a case study of an organization, right? And you take a small group and try to, study their behavior and all that. And an example is given. And more importantly, I did indicate that the last time that, see, we bash qualitative research most of the time, but most theories we use today were all constructed through qualitative study. Because when they finish, quantitative guy, they pick it and they try to extend it. So grounded theory is one where you are formulating a theory from a point of no knowledge. And they are gathering data as the basis to form a certain opinion. And then you go through some sort of methodological, study. There's something called constant comparative analysis, easier coding, teams are emerged, and then you're able to come out with some concepts, and then you test them. And then there's the narrative inquiry, which is also another form of research design. So when you are doing your research design, these are themes. In fact, if you go to ethnography, there are a number of research designs under them. If you go to phenomenology, there are a number of research designs under them. But you need to know that if you are choosing this one, it falls under this one. And then the narrative inquiry, another exciting one. In fact, these are the storytellers in research. They tell stories. That's all they do. All right. So they will go like what this guy Manasseh used to do. You understand? And Anas also does the same thing. That's more of a narrative inquiry. And what we know with qualitative study is the biases. You understand? But that is also accounted for because that's what the paradigm says. So most times, as much as you want to make your study look more credible, remember that the paradigm says that it's in a way accommodates what? The biases. Okay. And we also looked at once it is the relativist paradigm. The approach we use is the inductive approach. And that one, data collection, you understand? We gather rich data, detailed observation from participants. So qualitative talks about what? Depth rather than breadth. Take note. So, and we don't need too big sample to do that. I mean, some studies have said that a country like Ghana, I mean, a country with about, like, let's say Kenya, there are too many, or Nigeria, you need only 40 participants in qualitative study. Some studies have said you cannot go beyond that, okay? But sometimes what most of our supervisors will tell us, we are inclined to do that. But you see, at the PhD level, we are all learning. And you need to, provide a superior argument to be able to what? Back whatever, what you're doing. Now, pattern identification. In qualitative study, we discover recurring themes and what? Concepts in the data. Whether we are doing case study or whatever. You come up with what? Recurring what? Themes. And Francis, in your study, a similar trend was seen, okay? You already had your teams, but you were merging them. But in their responses, there were recurring what? Themes that were emerged. That fell under the overall what? Concept that you had. And that helped you to know whether you are aligning to something or you are disaligning to something. And then it says that once you collect data, the inductive study, you do pattern identification. The next thing is what? You build what? Theory. Do you understand the process? So most qualitative study, that's what it is. But most times people don't build theory. They just take the views, the themes, and then they discuss it. And most times we hear of thematic what? Analysis. We pick it and say that this guy said this, the other guy said that, and all that. Now, he said qualitative research follows an inductive logic starting from specific observation and moving towards broader generalization and theories. Unlike the hypothesis testing approach of quantitative research, qualitative inquiry builds understanding from the ground up through what? An iterative cycle of data collection and analysis. That's what it does, from the ground. So data from the ground, as if there's nothing. And let me give you this example. Anytime you are going to a field of study and you do research, you read literature, and you realize that it appears that there's not much that has been done in that field, you cannot do quantitative study. You understand? It's a field that has not been studied extensively, especially an area you want to study. And then it appears that you don't even have manuscripts on them. You cannot do quantitative study. You understand what I'm saying? Because we need to understand the system first. So what even dictates your methodological choices has to even do with whether that field has been studied or not. Because most times when you do quantitative study, what do we do? Sometimes we have existing data. Sometimes people know about the topic. If they don't know about it, it becomes what? An issue. But if it's a new area that you are delving into, do you know what sometimes happens? Sometimes you don't even have people to talk to. So you yourself, you do observation. You understand? And then you collect data. And then you report. So you'll be the first person who may have what? Studied that, phenomenon. But when there are people around, do you understand? You can talk to them. And that will probably be your pure findings that you've gotten. When the COVID-19 pandemic broke out, what happened? All studies that were qualitative. Because nobody knew about COVID-19. You couldn't have done quantitative study. They all did qualitative study. Even though some people were trying to put figures together, they were only reporting. Those figures they put together didn't follow any quantitative approach. They only collected it together and tried to use some of these tools to analyze them. But in the data collection procedure, they spoke to people. They counted people, the number of deaths. Do you understand? And then those that they interviewed and they gave them figures, they put it together. So take note of that. That is very, very important. So for instance, the study on university students activism might begin with what? Open-ended what? Interviews. All right? And field observation over time. And the researcher identify themes such as political what? Disillusionment, digital mobilization, peer solidarity, forming a grounded what? Understanding of the youth engagement. Then the quantitative people will come and look at the model and then they will now pick variables, administer questionnaires, do you understand? And then put them in. So that's what most of the time happens in the. Now, in the sampling technique for qualitative study, I mean, I think we shouldn't belabor this point. We talked about it. Most papers, I said go to Scopus Index papers, will do quantitative study and use purposive sampling. And I keep telling people that that is not an error. It's a sin. Why is it a sin? You've sinned against the paradigm. And one time when we have the discussion somewhere, one big professor said that, boys, what they are saying is true, but you see now you can even use it and with justification. I said, who said that? Which literature said that you can use with justification? And that you change the gender of a paradigm and say that you can add justification. So something like purposive sampling cannot and will never be a paradigm that, I mean, a technique that falls under what? Quantitative paradigm. It's always qualitative. And the argument has been that because I decided, okay, I'm studying about port operations, and I want to administer the questionnaire to what? Those who are into port operation in GPHA. And because I took that decision, it means it's purposive sampling. That is wrong. Purposive sampling goes to a certain systematic view. What you did by saying that you targeted those group of people actually falls in research under scope of study. And if you're a good researcher, you realize that when you are writing scope of study, you write scope in relation to the topic itself. You write scope in relation to the objectives. You write scope in relation to what? The population of the study. And that is where you scope that for the purpose of this study, we will only administer questionnaires to those whose activity directly relates to what? Port operations. That doesn't make it purposive sampling. And that's why they get it wrong. Okay? And then you do snowballing. That is more about, I mean, using one person to get the other. You understand? Influential people to get the other. I want to get to Professor Malcolm, but it's difficult. But after interviewing Dr. Esiedu, and I just piggyback on Dr. Esiedu to get what? I mean, Professor Malcolm. Then we have the theoretical sample that is associated with what? Grounded what? Theory. And this approach involves collecting data until you get to what? A saturating point. We've talked about it. Saturating means that they are giving you the same what? Responses, and you cannot proceed further. Now, this is why we got to the last time. The data qualitative data collection what? Method. This is very important. The first one is what? In-depth what? Interviews. Here you can have semi-structured or unstructured what? Format. Semi-structured or what? Unstructured. You use semi-structured because you want to have a guide. Anytime you're using semi-structured, interview guide, what it means is that you have an idea about the subject. So you are using that to shape what you are doing. But when you use unstructured format, what it means is that you agree. Okay, so you see what dictates some of these things. And you have one-on-one what? Interaction with what? Participants. And also allow for what? Exploration of what? Personal what? Experiences. And typical what? Audio recorded and transcribed what? Interview. This one, either on Zoom, you have it, interaction and all that. Then we have the other ones, which is what? Focus what? Group discussion. What will inform focus group discussion? You want a certain sense of what? Consensus. And you are dealing with what? Some experts. And you want to make sure that all ideas converge. Okay, so you do group interview, generating what? Iterative what? Data. And then you offer 6 to 10 what? Participants per what? Group. And this when you are doing what we call Delphi. You understand? This is what is the Delphi study. I mean, this is the group that most of the time in literature, they don't go beyond 6 to 10. Don't do 4, but do 6, between 6 and what? 10. And then you leverage group dynamics to surface what? Insight. And useful for what? Community-based research. Okay. So maybe when in your work you did focus group, that was the essence of the focus group. Then we have participants observation. This is also what? A data collecting method. So this one, researcher immerses in what? The research setting. This is what I said, that most anthropologists do this. They live with the person. They want to know. You understand? They live in the community, because that's the only way you can, if you want to learn language and it's research, you have to be part of them and then learn it. And then captures behavior, routines, and interactions documented through what? Detail-filled growth. And then you have it reveals tacit cultural knowledge. Okay. Then we have document and artifact analysis. That is also, qualitative data collection. This one, examination of written or virtual material. So let me give you an example. Yes, they go to the pyramid and then, the signs on the wall. These are all documented. It could be audio, it could be video. All right. When I went to Egypt and I met one, in fact, the person who was taking us to the talk was a PhD guy. He was not. And he said he's doing Egyptology. He did Egyptology. And I said that, okay, so in Egyptian history, how far have you gone? He said he's not studied 5% even.
Even though
he
did
Egyptology. So there's a lot, there's a lot of, there's a huge knowledge gap that exists that are yet to be. And it goes with, so for him, as he states, he believes that he might be able to cover 10% before he dies. You understand? Other people will, because they are healed. He said, you have history backdating 10,000 years. He said, did you go to the tombs? I say, yes. You saw some of the, bodies, like, Ramses during Moses' time, was over 6,000-7,000 years. So can I study? That's a whole, because 1,000 years is a whole. So that's what they do. So you take it bit by bit, have a general idea, and then now try to dip into, so in their field, you have someone who is about 80 years, and whatever he has learned about it, they document it, they do, videos about, they make sure they preserve that knowledge, because that's what continue from there. So it is document analysis is something we don't do. When people say they want to do qualitative study, they think that, okay, we have to do interview. No. See, you can take graphic reports for the past 10 years and then highlight a certain, your purpose is to see how political issues are reported based on whether that party is in government or not. No, it's a whole research. Yes, it's a whole research. So you want to see how, so you realize that because this one, you are taking the data, you are scanning in the system, do you understand? And you'll be taking topics, you understand, headlines. So in the first 3 months when MPP came to government, what was the headline? NDC, what was the headline? Then you begin to see patterns. So you'll be able to report that even state institutions are apolitics, or they are not. You get it? You could say that. And document analysis is very, very important, but it's an area that we all,
my studies, I did document.
Yeah, as part of it. Yeah, but it took the ISO data. And he said you include policies, diaries, and social media. Provide historical and what contextual what data, often complemented other what methods. So that is the approaches. And let's look at the data collection what method. So let's look at the data analysis, right? So data analysis, we have thematic analysis, number one, right? Now, the most common qualitative analysis method involving identification and organization of patterns into coherent themes. That is, and then we have the grounded theory coding. When I mention grounded theory, then the eyes open. So that is a systematic approach involving open coding. That is initial what? Labeling. Then Asia coding. That is identifying relationship between categories. And then selective coding, developing what? Core what? Themes. So this process is designed to build theory directly from what? Data. Rather than testing pre-existing what? Frameworks. You know what this means, that statement means. It says rather than testing pre-existing framework, and that's what quantitative people, they do. Let's start some sort of a show off to the quantitative people. That is pre-existing. A misfall to them, yes. Maybe that's. Then we have the narrative analysis that focuses on the structure and the content of what? The story. And I give you an example. Researchers examine how participants construct meaning through narrative what elements like plots, characters, and what sequence. And this approach is particularly valuable for research on what? Identity, life stories, and personal transformation. Okay. And then the last one is what? The discourse analysis that examines language use, power, dynamics, and what? Ideological what? Construct. Embedded in what? Communicate. So researchers scrutinize not just what is said, but how it is said and the broader social context that shapes communication pattern. In fact, when they are doing more of polls, this info analytics guy, that's what he was doing. He goes to a place where the guy says it's NDC domain, and then he tells you that this is a predominantly NDC domain, and the responses that came was expected. You understand? So they would want you to know that so that you don't blindly take the analysis hook, line, and sinker. So most times, discourse analysis, that's what it does. And there are softwares that we use, like in Vivo, Atlas, TI, Mazunda, and then Dinos, and then there are a lot of softwares that even Microsoft Word can use, for analysis. Now, when we come to the other side, see, in qualitative research or in the relativist ontology, we don't do, take note, we don't do validity. We don't do validity. Right? So you see these papers, qualitative research said validity, reliability. Right? What we do in the study is actually what we call, we do credibility, transferability, dependability, and what? Confirmability. This is how we make the findings look good or follow the pattern that has been established by the paradigm. So credibility, what do? Parallel to what? Internal validity. It is what? Listen, it is parallel to what? Internal validity. Credibility addresses how believable the findings. How believable. Why? Because they know there are biases in there. How believable. So techniques include member checking, right? Participant word validation. So I come to you, I say that I did that when I'm doing pilot. I come and ask you, what is the situation in GPHA regarding the change of government? And then you said so many things. I said, okay. Then I wait 3 days time and I kind of ask you the same question. But take note. No. No, it's you. Yeah, the same person. Remember, I can't cross-check from the other person because I'm doing, the paradigm is relativist. It's you. I can't go. So I come back and then ask you the same question. Now, if somebody sits on the panel and you want to find out, he said, okay, under what condition do you ask the first question? And so when we went there, you know, there was a change of government, there was whole euphoria in there. So the lady spoke at length, said, okay, after 3 days when we went there, he said she didn't say the same thing. He said, yes, obviously. Do you understand? Because the environment didn't allow the lady to objectively. So sometimes when you're administering these interviews, they want you to document the time you took it. And most times they will ask you, what is the break of the organization? When do they go to break? So when you say the break is 1 o'clock, and you say you started the interview 2:30, so the guy had eaten and probably will be dull. You understand? These things are part, and you have to report openly. And where there are issues, you have to state them. These are all things you do for the findings to be believable. All right? And then triangulation, using multiple sources. That's what you were talking about. So she says something, you want to validate from other sources. You're looking for what? Another documentation to do that, to make sure that what the person said was true. Then we have the transferability.
The peer debriefing. How different is it from triangulation? The peer debriefing.
No, but the normal debriefing, I mean,
maybe you can,
yeah.
All the participants will then be put together.
Then you'll be going into, then you'll be going, you'll be using the focus group, approach, right? In fact, she's saying that how is peer debriefing different from what? Triangulation. Triangulation, as I said, you just want different sources to make conclusion. And then transferability equivalent to external what? Validity. And that is transferability concern whether findings might apply to other what contexts. Okay? And this is achieved through take what? Description, providing detailed account of settings, participants, and what context. So if you want to say that Anglo-Blueship, the market, the environment, you understand, is equivalent to Kwashe Jasu at Committee 1, then you should give me a very vivid description that shows that. That is the only way I can what? Transfer the findings. I can say this finding, works with this. Now we are saying that because qualitative research cannot what? Extend its findings to the larger what? Population. But to a certain large extent, if I'm able to describe vividly a certain community and what they do, I could do the same thing. I could transfer and say that they have similar, variables within the community and all that. So I can transfer. And then we have the dependability. And this is analog to what? Reliability. All right. And then Dependability focuses on what? Consistency and replicability. Okay. Audit trails, documenting methodological decisions and changes throughout what the research process are essential. You see what I told you, that the time you took the interview, did you administer orally the ethical statement? Did you do that? Because you do. I remember one guy interviewed me. He came to some guy, some economist. He used to be, he did his PhD outside Malmo. He has some young guy. During our time, he came. And that was the first time I was being interviewed. And he said that, Mr. Boyson, what I had to do is that I administer the ethical statement. So in all sincerity, he said, if I start and you're not okay, just let me know so I back out. All right. At any time, if you want me to stop the interview, I'll do that. And I just want to seek your permission before I do the recording. Is it fine with you? Are you okay? Then he started. At the middle, he said, Mr. Boyson, is everything okay? Can I proceed? Are you tired? Do you want to take a break? He was recording all this. He was recording all this because the guy was doing purely qualitative work. So he was recording all this. So he said that dependability, if you document all this process, then it is easier for us to depend on the results. You get it? And then now confirmability, related to what? Objectivity. Confirmability ensures findings reflect participants' voice rather than researchers' bias. So do you know what we do? We come back and what you said, we give it back to you. And some people say, hey, like you told me, this one I didn't say it. Oh. Did I say it? Hey, then what was I thinking? No, I'm not the one who said this. Change it.
You're walking the floor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Hey, did I say this? No, maybe I wasn't thinking well. So this one, you have to do that. A very good qualitative study to do that. And strategies include reflexivity. We talked about it the other time. I talked about positionality and reflexivity. Positionality is your person in the research. Who are you? In GPHA, are you the boss? Do you understand? So if that position of power will influence the study, because you, the researcher, you are actually the instrument to collect the data. So if it's going to affect, do you understand? How do you deal with it? So dealing with it is what? The reflexivity. And you can do that in so many ways. Okay? You can decide rather to recruit another person because of your image that is going to have influence on it to do that. Okay? Most times that's what people do. Or really having the interview with the people without recourse having face-to-face what? Dialogue. But the interview is done maybe through electronic means, or you send the questionnaire, the interview guide to them and ask them to answer without you being there. So you would have said that because of because of my person in GPHA, in order to deal with this, for my department, I abstained from having a personal contact with them and rather gave them some interview, questions that they could complete on the, and I asked them never to state their names and then even their roles. I wanted for them to be very comfortable and have the honest truth, from it. So, and then you do triangulation and audit trails to track conclusion back to the data. So when we are tracking, that how did I get to this conclusion? Okay, I did, interviews with them. The next thing was that I went back when I transcribed the data. I went back and then tried to confirm what they said. Then what they said, there were issues that they raised that I find out whether they were documented in their strategic plan, and I found some of traces of them. Do you get it? I did that. So after I've done that, then this is what I reported. So this was what I gathered. This is what my reports are. You get it? And this is the time the interview was taken. The period it was taken for 15 minutes. You understand? I administered the ethical statement. All these things in qualitative study has to be there. So who says that qualitative study is easy? And it's easy. It's extremely what? Difficult. So qualitative research case example. So let's see how it works. So research question. This is very exciting. Why do traditional birth attendants remain influential despite policy shifts towards hospital birth? All right. That's a research question. Okay. So the philosophical approach is what? Constructivism. Reality shaped by social beliefs and cultural norms. The design and sampling case study of 2 rural communities with what? Recursive sample. Data collection, interviews, observation, and document what? Analysis. Analysis and validation. Thematic analysis with triangulation for what? Credibility. Do you understand? So you shouldn't miss this. You shouldn't. All right, questions. Dr. Seado, qualitative is your area, so maybe you want to share some insight.
Doctor, the way you are going about the thing, what else? I don't have anything. You are doing justice to them. But I saw that in your slide, you talk about positionality, but you didn't, it's not in the slides. Or you have treated that already.
No, we are
the
talking
flexibility.
Yeah.
And positionality. You treated that already.
We had spoken about that earlier on. Sorry, I didn't speak about it. Yeah.
Okay, so but I also think that how you started, let it be part of the slides.
We've done that. I'll send the recordings to you.
Okay. So in fact, you are doing more than
I actually dealt with it extensively, but because you were joining, we decided to give a recap so that
okay.
But then we have dealt with it extensively.
Okay. So in the qualitative, what is the sample size, the rate? Some people were saying it should at least 7, some also say 10 until you get saturated. I don't know.
So
have you show light on that?
Because because the paradigm and let me say this. This is where research becomes very interesting, Doc. The issue is this. The paradigm, the axiology for that paradigm is subjectivity. You understand? It's subjectivity.
It's subjectivity, so, yes.
Ordinarily, you are not compelled to give proof. You understand?
Okay, okay.
You chose.
You are not compelled to give the sample size you selected.
No, I'm saying that you are not compelled to give proof.
Okay.
Yeah. You only give justification based on your study because you have your subjectivity in the study.
Okay.
And that is where most times we get it wrong. So somebody on a panel is asking
the sample size.
The sample size, and he said, okay, which author? Which author? I mean, what is it for? I can choose to follow a certain author. That because this guy did this, so I'm doing that. But the paradigm permits to choose my size based on what I'm doing. And the reason why you cannot put these guys in brackets is this. I give you an example. On the field, there is enough discoveries to be on earth. It is not that we predetermine the sample size based on statistical what? I mean, computation. No.
Okay.
But it is actually shaped by even what we see. Some societies, we've not been there before. You get it? So we cannot prejudge. So I'm going to GPHA. And I want to do a study, a qualitative study about women in, I mean, port business, maritime and port business. All right. Already, I'm being told that in the lifetime of GPHA, there have not been a woman director general before.
Okay.
You understand? The only woman who has emerged is the director of port. And then some few women in some area. How do I sit here and predetermine the sample size? So most qualitative study, we go on the field without having in our mind the sample that we want to deal with. You understand? Especially when it's a subject area that we are not familiar with. If we predetermine, then we have shifted the paradigm into quantitative. And this is what our brothers, this is what our brothers do not really understand. If you predetermine, then that's what you have done. And so if we are allowing what you are doing to be shaped by paradigm, trust me, all right, we will get our research very organized.
Wow.
We will get it organized.
This explanation there. I wish you are on the panel, then you explain it that way. Because recently we had a great argument that somebody somewhere saying it should be 7. Students use 5. Come and see.
So and you see, and the thing is that these things are documented. They are not something that is out of the world. You understand? They are documented. They are available, and that is why, if somebody is doing qualitative study, the tendency that the panel members who do not understand qualitative study will try to box the person to move to quantitative is high, because the person is going to ask a quantitative question. You understand? Yeah. So how did you determine your sample? That question is erroneous. You understand?
For the quantitative study.
For qualitative study is erroneous. Quantitative studies is valid, because quantitative study, we are coming from an objective point of view. Our ideology is what?
The positivist. The positivist
from a qualitative point of view, our axiology is subjectivity.
Yes, the qualitative.
Okay?
Yes.
And we need to understand these things very well, so we do not commit what I call in research sin against the paradigm. Because you see, we are talking about these things going back and forth. The last time, Dr. Adam, we were having a discussion, and he was telling me that this paradigm thing that people are misapplying, the Kuhn and then Popper, they have to run for their lives. You understand?
Yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, it came to a time that people were going to be assassinated just because they have a different worldview, because these Vienna circle were so powerful, all right? And they wanted people to extend, because these guys were saying that the world is flat. And then they were saying that this another group of, who were not Aristotelian, came and said that, hey, the Cartesian guy said that the world cannot be flat, though. The world is spherical.
Yeah.
Then the argument started. And indeed, there was another group of people who said that even determining whether the world is flat or spherical doesn't hold water, because you can't be in the world to see how it is. You get the argument? You can't be in the world to see how it is. You need to go outside the world. And then this guy just flawed all this, theories. Okay? You can't be inside. be able to say that the world is flat or, spherical.
Yes.
So, Dr. Adam, do you have any?
That's
any
great.
comments?
Dr.
No,
Wilder,
go
I
ahead.
think this,
Go ahead, please.
Dr. This lecture, you have to organize it again. No?
Let's finish. If we have
You have
the,
to
maybe we'll
organize
look at
it
it.
again.
We'll look
Another
at it
time.
at our level. I
Yeah.
know there are a lot of
All right.
inconsistencies that are creating problems for us, but we'll deal with them as we. So let's quickly look at the quantitative perspective. But then I'll draw a line and then we'll draw the curtains down for today. So for the quantitative paradigm now, yeah, hello?
Hello?
Yeah. Dr. Sedi, I can hear you.
Doctor, I'm fine.
Okay. Dr. Adam, you wanted to say something? He said he's fine.
Asking me for my contribution. I said, oh,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I'm saying that if because I know you are a lover of philosophy of science. That's why I'm asking your view.
Yes, well, you go ahead.
I should go ahead. Ima, are you
Yes,
there?
please.
Ima, do you have a question?
I'm there. I'm there.
Are you enjoying it? Do you have a question?
Not yet, but my network was bad. It was fluctuating, but it's okay. I'm okay. I'm following you. Thank you.
Okay. So let's look at the quantitative research paradigm. Again, because of what you are doing, I'm taking you back to just say what I said in the beginning, that without clear graphs of paradigmic assumptions, researchers risk inconsistencies in their research approach, potentially undermining the coherence and credibility of their work. Just keep that in mind. In fact, I am actually going to, glass that statement and put it in my room as a philosopher. All right? Because everything about what we are doing in philosophy of science hinges on this. So, for the quantitative research paradigm, our ontology is what? Realism. And we come from what? An objective what? Axiology. That's where we come from. Our values, our norms and culture, they are all seen from an objective point of view. Our epistemology are more of what? Positivism and post what? Positivism. And now let me say this. Now the positivism are actually the core physical scientists, right? They are the pure core physical scientists. In their research, there is no margin of error. Take note that even though man cannot achieve 100%, they will not manufacture a plane and say that the error of margin is what? Who will sit in that plane? No, nobody is going to sit in that plane. They will not do MRI machine and say that the thing can misdiagnose. No one is going to do that. So most of these guys, they do in research, they do the waterfall. Their methodology, when they start, it has to go out and finish. They cannot come back and make corrections, right? So the positivists, that is who they are. But for us, the social science guys, we go for post-positivists. Do you know why? Because in formulating our hypothesis, we give a certain margin of error. We have 10% significance level, 5% and 1%. Do you remember? Now, The significance level that we call the margin of error, it is the allowable margin of error that the study can accommodate. So if you are doing 10% significance level, it means that there is 90% confidence in the data. You know what that means? It means that if you fly 100 aeroplanes, 10 will crash. The 5% is follows, and the 1% follows. So if you are doing a quantitative study and you are a social scientist, and Professor Mensah once raised that issue, you cannot be positivist. You can only be post-positivist, the like of Kuhn and Karl Popper, who were arguing that positivist is not wholly the way to go. But they also didn't indicate that they are relativists. They are positivists, but they are saying that accommodate some margin of what? Error. Does it make sense? So he said knowledge is understood as observable, measurable, and verifiable through what? Empirical evidence. While positivists maintain complete objectivity, it's possible. Post-positivists acknowledge that absolute certainty is unattainable, but still emphasize empirical testing. You get it? So they accommodate what? The error. But he says that let's test. See, Kuhn didn't say we shouldn't test. He's saying that there's a new paradigm shift. I mean, this guy, Karl Popper, never said that we should. He said no, instead of verifying, falsifying. It's also another form of what test. Okay? So a researcher testing whether a new teaching method improves mathematics scores relies on what? Standardized what? Test as observable evidence, while recognizing the limitation of measurement. You understand? All the scientific instruments that we use, even if we pick, I mean, a certain, how did you, the other time you gave me hospital when they pick your, when they pick your specimen and you're going to test for malaria or whatever. See, the guy at the lab, the thing is only giving him a certain percentage to show that the malaria exists, but it's not wholly true. You understand? Even DNA, they give you in percentage.
89.
You understand? So when we are doing our research and we say we did positivist, it means we are purely these guys. But post-positivists. In fact, in your work, you would have seen positivist. You know why? I wanted us to teach this thing. I wanted us to do it. Yeah. So, but I wanted us to do this so you will appreciate. Okay. From the, yes, a paradigmic, point of view. Okay. Professor Mensah, who taught us this, said that, Dave, we cannot achieve positivism. We cannot. You get it? But in theory, these things what exist. So anytime you're using any instrument, any data collection technique, and more even importantly, when we are doing quantitative study, if we are doing pure positivism, we shouldn't use sample. We should use the entire population. But you understand? We shouldn't use sample. No, you understand what I'm saying? You shouldn't use sample because a sample is statistically used to represent the population. it doesn't. That is why we take the sample, because we know there's a tendency of a margin of error. Our population of this country is never fixed. It said Ghana is about. We cannot, and it goes back to say what Poon was saying. We cannot wholly say this is what it is. But we have to do the test. And then the axiology. The values that this subjective perspective bring in research is the neutrality. All right? And it's the same procedure we use for democracy here. That give everybody the chance to vote. You get it? That's what we do here. So you have to be neutral. You don't have to influence what? The research. And said quantitative research strives to separate personal values from what? The research process. Whilst qualitative people include their value system in the research process. Okay? The researcher maintains distance, epic point of view, epic, from participants and employs standardized what? Protocols to minimize bias and maintain what? Objectivity. So you see here, so if you go and say that me, I use purposive sampling here, you are dead. You understand? You are dead. And then in a randomized control trial assessing a malaria versus effectiveness, researchers carefully avoid interactions that might influence participants' what? Responses. That's what they do. So quantitative research design, descriptive design. Did you see descriptive design at the qualitative session? So you see a qualitative study and they say they are doing descriptive. And see what we say then. Describe characteristics and behavior of a population phenomena without manipulating the variable. You are describing.
But isn't that subjective? Because how
you are not manipulating
relative. Okay.
You are not manipulating the variables. It's what's being based on what you get from it. You say you are. I'm seeing you are a lady, and you are saying that I know you are a lady, but you're saying that you're also a lady. I'm just picking the info from you. Remember, it's neutrality. You see, that's how we have to approach it all. You see, now you see the use of the ontology, epistemology, axiology. This is what you use to explain it. You don't even talk about qualitative and quantitative, but that's how you look at it. So from your worldview of things, that is what? Realism or relativism. From you, the researcher, your relationship with the reality, positivist or constructivist or rationalist or whatever. Okay? The researcher's values, the axiology and norms and practices, subjectivity, objectivity. That's how you see it. So it makes life easy, for you. And it's an example, a national survey describing digital banking usage across what? Income groups. Correlation design. It examines the relationship between two or more variables without directly what? Manipulating them. Now, so there's a lady that came here. It's even sad that the lady is not here. The supervisor said that he should do an experimental study. But the experimental study, the variables are controlled. You understand? But the guy said she do experimental study. So she sat here and I said that let's read experimental study. And I said that, so the banking people you are going to talk, are you going to group them somewhere and make sure that nobody goes to the washroom or something? What are you going to do? He said, it's not possible. And I said, that's why we do quasi experimental study, so that we do not have control on the variable. The reason why experimental study, we have control over it is that we want to cage them so that the external influences do not affect what? The variables. You are observing, maybe, I hear the mice. Yeah, the mice, they say they are very good in scent. When it comes to scent, they can even, and the dogs sniff cocaine and all that. So, whilst that activity is going on, somebody backs jollof with a very good spices and passes by. What do you think?
Ghana jollof or Nigeria jollof?
It must be Ghana jollof. You understand? You understand what will happen. So that in that instant, there's no control measure. But if there's control measure, they make sure that the airspace is controlled and all that. So this one, we don't want to have control over it. You know why? Because we don't want to be subjective. So what the man said for experimental study was actually for the qualitative guys. You get it? But the man didn't realize it. That was what it was. Because we said that subjective neutrality, we don't have to interfere. And then the experimental design investigate cause and effect by manipulating the independent variable and randomly assigning what? Participant. So example, testing whether an exercise intervention reduces what? Blood pressure in hypertensive what? Patient. So this one, we want to establish that it is this medication that you took that really caused what? The malaria. You took this medication, it caused the malaria. The reason being that anytime we use regression analysis, there is a term we call error term. That term there, we say it covers the unexplained factors, but we don't know what they are. So we want to take this thing out. So we want to be deliberate. So we are doing this study. We want to really say that this one really caused what? This. But Professor Mensah will tell you that in real life, there is no causality. And I learned this from. We cannot, no matter the experiment we do, that vividly we say that it is A that caused what? B. There's actually unexplained what factor. But we try, scientific discovery try to do that. So for experimental study, we are actually apportioning the cause. So we say cause and effect. And that's why we use regression. Regression doesn't actually explain what. But you see what we are doing? This one, we say investigates the cause and effect by manipulating what? The independent what. So the variable, the outcome, the variable that causes the outcome variable is what we are manipulating. You get it? And then we, by manipulating independent variable randomly and assigning what? Participants to it. Then we have the quasi-experimental what? Design. Similar to what? Experimental, but without full what? Randomization of participants. So your work, you did correlational what? Design. An example, evaluating e-learning impact of student achievement schools. So the design selection depends on the research question. Now take note. It is a question that we ask. And variable relationship and practical what? Constraints. Researchers must also distinguish between cross-sectional design That is one-time data collection. And let me talk about this. Cross-sectional design. You see what we take questionnaires and we go away. That's a cross-sectional study. It's one time. There's a longitudinal study where we pick the data, you understand, over time. So cross-sectional, they are collecting data, and longitudinal design, data collected over what? Time. To observe trends or what? Changes. Most times, longitudinal data becomes like panel data, like the one you use. All right? It has been collected over time. And then you look at a 20-year span of energy consumption, looking at FDI and other things within that span, okay, to see, the impact that it will have. So these ones are broad design. See, under correlational design, you can have different sub designs, okay? And then under experimental design, you can have, under quasi-experimental, you can have different designs, under them. Now, the deductive approach in quantitative research. Now, please observe something. And Dr. Siedu said, by bear me right. You see people doing qualitative research. And then the question is asked that, where is your theory? What is your theory? Did you see theory anywhere in qualitative? We build theory ourselves. So the guy is doing qualitative, so they said he used a theory to guide. Who asked you to do that? Dr. Sia, did you get what I'm saying? Are you there? And these things are very worrying. Because we read somewhere in the qualitative study is that we start the data from the ground up. But you cannot do a quantitative study without theory. That is unacceptable. Why? Because those guys have said that knowledge must come through what? Verification. You know what that means? And that there is an objective way of measuring. So, if you are doing quantitative study, the topic that you chose, what they meant was that the variables in that topic, you understand, must have been picked from a certain established theory. Otherwise, you can use it.
The place where you said the quantitative people have.
Yes. Pre score. Yes. FGI. Yeah, that sets the premise for them. It said predetermined. So the predetermined is saying that if you want to do a quantitative study, and you say that you want to do something about the impact of IT on something, they are saying that maybe impact of AI, you understand, on maybe the livelihood of people. You know what they want to ask? They say, okay, the impact of AI. This AI you are talking about, we want to know how this AI is defined. Do you know why? That in psychology, we see AI differently. In sociology, we see AI what? Different. In economics, AI is different. And then in IT, technology, AI is different. So which AI are you talking about? Because the guy who is using, doing psychology, he sees AI as chatbot, ChatGPT. The IT guy is seeing AI as machine learning and deep learning. So which one are you talking about? We want to know. You understand? So that is why theory precedes quantitative study. In fact, that is actually what defines the topic that you are choosing. Okay, and somebody comes and he does quantitative study, no theory, no what. So you are using gender. So this gender, how did you define it? say gender according to who? From which, I mean, theory? Because gender in sociology is different from gender from psychology. In fact, in other jurisdictions, gender has 3 variables. You are talking about gender from which? So we don't know what you are talking about. We want to understand. So these things are very, so starting with what? Established theories, frameworks, or principles. And then formulating what? Testable predictions. Derived from what? See, derived from what? I want us to all see. Derived from what? Yima, are you there? Yima, are you there?
Yes, from teams.
I want you to pay attention to this. Derived from what? Theory.
Teams.
Not factors. Derived from theory. Then
variables. Factors and variables.
Collecting empirical data through what? Structured what? Measurement. So that's why you have structured what? Questions. You see people doing quantitative study, and they have their questionnaire, and they get to the top and down there, they say any comment. Hey, any comment to do what? So if the guy writes the comment, how are you going to code it? You understand what I'm saying? That becomes problematic. And that's confirmation and rejection. No, but quantitative, I see it every day. Confirmation and rejection. Analyzing data to support or refute the hypothesis. But look at what is happening. Now, since the hypothesis is premised on the theory, okay, in quantitative study based on the realism ontology, they tend to extend theory. Do you understand? Or reject it. So what you'll be doing here is to use a theory to explain a phenomenon. So that's all they do. So they've caged everybody in what? A certain bracket. So we're doing research, a theory of planned behavior, theory of resource-based view. Do you understand that organizations use, resources to achieve competitive advantage? So if you look at how theories are formulated, how hypotheses are formulated, it's kind of interesting. I think the last time I showed you that.
Under quantitative data analysis approaches, under the grounded theory coding, so the systematic approach involving open coding as initial labeling, Excel coding, identifying relationship between categories, and selective coding, developing core teams. This process is designed to build theory directly from data rather than testing pre-existing framework.
You understand? That was the miscall. Okay. Please, let's watch this. This is somebody's work, and I like to do that. Okay. This is a theory that is being so there is a theoretical review, there's an empirical review, and what? A conceptual review, if any. In qualitative study, you don't see theoretical review. All right? There's no theoretical review. There's no established or predetermined theory to guide the study. Because our axiology is from what? A subjective point of view rather than being caged. So those who do that, they sin against the paradigm. All right? So I want to show you something. No, you are doing the theoretical review to do what? That's the question. What are you using it for? I want you to see. hypothesis here. So please, let's look at this. Hypothesis on leadership and what organizational effectiveness. I want you to see how it goes and how the theory, I mean, we are going to juxtapose that with what we have said here. All right, starting with what? A theoretical framework, hypothesis, collecting empirical data through structured questionnaire, and analyzing the data. So I want to test this hypothesis. So for the first thing is to establish the premise of the hypothesis and see how it works. If you are not using a quantitative study, why do you use a predetermined what framework, which is a theory for the work? You've missed it. So watch. It's a leadership commitment plays a critical role in successful implementation of ISO standard and overall organizational effectiveness. Now, the introduction of ISO 2001 and blah, 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 within the service industry requires a strategic vision and resource allocation and managerial oversight, of all which are functions of strong leadership commitment. Now, the resource-based view provides a theoretical foundation. Now, take note for how leadership, for understanding, theoretical foundation for understanding. I told you that theories are used to explain what? Phenomena. To understanding how leadership as an intangible resource enhance an organization's ability to implement such what and sustain what management system effectively. Now, the resource-based view suggests that firms with strong leadership structure gain a sustainable competitive advantage by aligning their internal resource with what? The compliance goals. Okay? In contrast, firms with weak leadership engagement often struggle with fragmented compliance practice, audit inconsistencies, and ineffective what? Implementation of ISO framework. Research conducted by this talks about this. Now, another critical perspective is provided by institutional theory. Now, having done all this, after talking about all the theories, institutional theories and all that, now watch here. We say here that formulation testable what? Prediction derived from what? The theory. But because we want to do this, we have to provide evidence that the theory we are going to test, there has been empirical evidence of similar works that have been tested in that area. So he said that evidence from studies highlight that service firms, structured leadership, engagement programs include executive-level compliance, ISO certification, and leadership training on integrated work management system, report better risk management outcome and process optimization. He has hooked the theory that he established as a foundation to test the hypothesis with an empirical evidence that has happened before. So that is the premise now. Now watch this. He said that furthermore, firms that embed leadership-driven compliance cultures experience higher workforce motivation and improve customer trust as ISO compliance becomes an organization priority rather than a regulatory obligation. Drawing from the theoretical and empirical insights, this is what we are being taught here. There's it. Theory, hypothesis, right? Insights. This study proposes the following hypothesis. See here, if you don't formulate your hypothesis this way, you have a problem. So that is why sometimes when I engage you people and some counter argument comes from somewhere, sometimes I listen and I keep quiet. So this is what one of the guys that I was I was offering consultancy for was argue with me. You know that person. Argue with me. Everyday argument. I said, because my supervisor said that's okay. So for almost 6 months, we were going back and forth. And I said, okay, no problem. You know what? We're going to do research methods in 2 weeks. It was somebody who led him to me, but he's a big man in government. And I told him that the English you write for the president to read is different from what we do in research. So don't use that English. It's different. So we went through this philosophy of science. And believe me, when we were done, the following week, he called me and said, Boyson, you know what? I said, no, I fired my supervisor. I've changed him. I have a different supervisor. He said, well, I wrote a strong-worded letter, the university. And you know me, what you taught me, and all the reviews the guy has done, I realized that he doesn't understand what he's doing. And he was going to mess me up. And the chair of the PhD just agreed with me. So they've changed. Another lady took up, and in 3 months, this guy graduated. And during his defense, you know the comments the panel made? He said, students like you is why we teach.
What he believed in.
He understood what he was doing. If you watch his Zoom, the recording, and you know, we did framework Viva, and I told him when they ask a question, and you even know it very well, take your time. Sometimes because you want to flex, you tell the person that, can you reiterate the question? You know what you want to say. And then he should take a pen and a paper and pretend to be right. He did all that. And the way he killed the question. You understand? The way he killed the question, I think there was a question they asked him about why he did a purely quantitative study, use structural equation modeling. They asked him a correlational design, and they asked him that why did he choose the quantitative method? And then he was saying, and he said, okay, me as a researcher, I come from the positivist epistemological dimension, and my worldview is more of looking at things from an objective point of view. And you realize that I had indicated that I was a post-positivist, but not a real positivist, because indeed it's true that those left-wing guys, they believe that knowledge can be acquired through verification. But I tend to agree with those who defected that these are the post-positivists, that there's no one fit for size, solution. But then knowledge must still be tested. So you realize that I derived about 6 hypotheses, and I had said my margin of error was 5%. This was to accommodate the fact that the post-positivists believe that, there could be measuring what effect in it, and that has been accommodated for. So that's where I come from. But given that my research is actually looking at the effect of these variables on the other, and the fact that I didn't want to interfere with the observation because I was an objective. I use quasar, non-experimental, said anything, it's a correlational design, which is not actually measuring real impact, but the effect. And that was what informed me. They said, I was there, and I was just listening to the video and said, wow. And then one professor said that That's a very scholarly response, the way of really, the guy makes everything for the soup inside. You understand? You got it. And they took him to the structural equation modeling. They looked at, I mean, he said, why structural equation modeling? And he started, it's okay. You know, we've been using regression. I mean, those in econometrics have been using simultaneous equation and other logistics regression. And these things were scaring a lot of people. You understand? So you realize that when we go to school, most times, these mathematical guys, I mean, they are on one side, and then the philosophy and sociology. But the mathematical guys are not better off than them. You understand? Because if you work on a device, the device will be used in a social environment, and they talk more about it. So I think the framers of structural equation modeling was to bring all these models under one structural model. The guy has defined it. Structural model to accommodate, I mean, what the social sciences and the philosophy into one structural model. So you realize that in structural equation modeling, we don't write an equation, but you see paths. You understand? We are more into tables, and then we don't use, VIF, and we use simple terms so that those in sociology will understand, they can relate and all that. The day I went to him, in his office, and he told me that, Dave, do you know that I started the PhD in 2005? He completed in 2023. No, is that? I'm just giving examples. That's what I started. That's why I ended, because I never make progress. And he was all in tears. And I told him he's so far one of the best students I've handled. You get it? He really demonstrated that, yeah, he understood what he wrote. And research, I know what he's doing out there. I mean, I can tell you, I know, he will be working with the World Bank, will be doing, because he was already a critical person and also veered into this. You get it? So, I mean, it's some way. So in this course, we confirm or we reject what? Hypothesis. In hypothesis formulation, we always deal with the what? The null hypothesis. So we reject the null hypothesis, or we fail to reject. That's the two language. The two statement. We reject or we fail to reject. If we fail to reject, then it means that the null hypothesis, you understand, do not stand. In fact, when we are testing hypothesis, the target is to, disregard the null hypothesis. That's the target, because it is the not. You get it? So that when the margin of error stays within the allowable, tolerable limits, then we say that we reject the null hypothesis. And anytime there's rejection, then it means that we have proven a certain theory right or otherwise. You get it? So that's the essence, of it. And the sampling techniques, please, have you seen it? Do you see purposive here? Dr. Adam, have you seen it? Yima, have you seen it?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Simple random sampling. See, every unit has equal selection probability. And take note. Why would I use simple random sampling if I'm doing a certain study in a community? In a community where we have heterogeneous population, it is easy to do what? Simple random sampling. Do you get it? It's simple to do that. But when we have a population and we have more people who are calm, than others, than Kusasis, I'll do stratified. You know why? Because I'll not get a true representation. If I randomize them, so I'll put them in strata and give them quota. So the first strata, if the census are 50, is 50 over the entire population, which is 200. Do you understand? The other guys are 100 over, so that I use that quota to do the randomization, so that I'll get more Ashantis than Kusasis. So I can put them together. So there's a reason why you should do the stratified random sampling. And then the clusters, selection of what group of clusters. All right. Efficient for geographically dispersed what population. And then typically has higher sampling what errors. Because when you pick a cluster as a sample, Charlie, it's a whole, and then systematic sampling, select at regular intervals, every 9 of what element. Exactly. Yeah. You understand? So you want to use a certain system or method to do. So the guys are all in here. So you say, come through the door. 1, 2, 3. You choose the third one. Stand here. 1, 2, 3. The third one. This is a systematic what? Sampling what? Technique. All right. There's no snowballing here. There's nothing here. That is the paradigm. And then what do we do? Somebody says doing quantitative studies. Said, what did you do? Interviews. It's a serious violation. Dr. Adam, now do you remember? Dr. Mabel, you remember? Dr. Mabel, are you there? You're already doctor. All right? No. So, questionnaire and surveys, right? Standardized test. That is the physical sciences.
Doctor, please, I'm here and I've heard you.
Okay, philosophical measures and secondary data source. She used secondary data source. Now, watch this. Sometimes people use secondary data source. I sat on a panel and somebody was asking, and the secondary, so what was your sample size? You have to define it. Secondary data source. But the sample was picked at the private data source. Secondary data source. So you know what you should be asking, Prof? You should be asking of the data points. Do you understand? We don't do sampling here. This data has inherited everything the primary data source have done. So what you have to ask, because he has no control about the data anymore. He's just picking it as it is to do his analysis. So what you have to ask is, what procedure did you use in preparing the data? Where did you get the source from? It's okay, Bank of Ghana data or World Bank. How did you retrieve it? I downloaded it in Excel site. Were there any missing, missing fields? If there were missing fields, how did you fix it? How did you understand? That's what you ask. And what are the data points? Box and Jenkins says that if you're doing any time series analysis, you need a minimum of 50 data points, right? So what data points did you use? Other theories have said other things, okay? So once you pass the 50 data points, it makes what? Sense. What it means is that you can build a very good trend analysis. All right. Trend depends on volume of what? Data. Be able to conclude on a certain pattern. All right. So this pre-existing data collected from other sources could be anything, for it. And then quantitative data techniques. Please take note. Descriptive what? Statistics. People say that descriptive statistics, it is not powerful, and they're like, hey, Lizzo, do you know that it is based on these descriptive statistics that today these chairs that the two of you are seated on, Frances is bigger than you. She's comfortable. You're also comfortable. Do you know why? Because they took the mean. All right? The mean. The staircase, everything that has around is mean and standard deviation. So you can't say that is useless. It is not. All right. So the mean and standard deviation, the skewness is very, very important. Do you understand? The ketosis, the shape, all those things are very important. So areas that research has not been done, I mean, they've done some qualitative research and you're doing the first quantitative. You don't want to go into inferential statistics. No. You want to understand, you have to describe. And that's why when we are doing quantitative study, they tell you that give us the demographic description. Let us see how many people did you interview? Administer the questionnaire. Who are they? Male and female. And sometimes they want you to do chi-square to check the relationship between the male and the female, whether their responses were the same or not, or check by region, or check by, age, whether this group responded just like these things in real industrial settings are used to take strategic decisions. It's not a joke. All right? Except that those who take your research, findings, do not really understand what they are doing. You realize that there are some groups when they do the chi-square, they realize that there's always a relationship between, their findings. That when this group does well, the other group does well. So organization wants to take, a decision that they know that when they train this group, and instead of taking all these people outside the country, when they train this group, when they come, there will be some effect on the other group. So they don't have to ordinarily train all of them, and it's cut costs. And then the inferential statistics, where we do the t-test, comparing means between groups. And when you say inferential statistics, that is where we use more statistical power. Right? More statistical power. And there are a lot of assumptions underlying this search. In fact, within this inferential statistics, there's the parametric and non-parametric analysis. You understand? The parametric analysis have the assumption that, all the data that is being used should be normally distributed. All right? Normal distribution. The non-parametric use takes the polynomial curve. It is not normally, but the one with the parametric test is most of the times the one that the statisticians will want to use. You understand? Because it has high statistical, power. And that's where you do the ANOVA, you compare means across multiple groups, and then correlation and regression. And regression, now you go to the higher order, the single regression, multiple regression, and now you even go to binomial and multinomial regression, where this time the dependent variable is having more than one indicators. You understand? You can decide to do a regression where you have, what if it's a male? What will be the outcome? What if it's a female? That's binomial, 2. Multinomial, 3 and 4. Upwards. You want to do, and then logistics regression and all that. Then the chi-square test that I talked about is also here. That's more of categorical data, like I talked about, male, female. And then the structural equation modeling, testing theoretical models. And so basically, so you use SPSS, data, R, SAS, E-views, and all that. Now, the next seminar I'm going to do is to teach you how to run these softwares on the air without, recourse to buying this expensive software and all that. We'll learn how to do that. So we come to the last part, validity. And so now we are talking about validity and reliability. All right? So there's internal validity, there's external validity, there's construct validity, there's reliability, and content validity. okay, with quantitative what study. So you can go through the archives of most universities and those who have done qualitative study, and I swear to God, 90% you see validity and reliability in it. All right, you see these things. And so quantitative research case, research question, philosophy, and what? Design. Have you seen it? Positivist approach using what? Spatial or post-positivist. And then what? Sampling. Stratified random sampling of 20 schools, 10 urban, 10 rural, with 800 total students. You see what they are talking about. Data collection, pre-test, post-test using standardized mathematical assessment, demographic analysis, paired test, ANOVA, regression, and all that. Now, it said the educational research example demonstrate the application of quantitative methodology to establish causal relationship and measurement for intervention effect. So, and then we'll end here. So Monday, we'll talk about mixed method. That will be purely online. We'll talk about mixed method, right? Online. It's holiday. So we'll do, you sit in the comfort of your home, and then we do. So
what will the time be?
Could you do it earlier so that if we want to chill? What time? What time? Dr. Adam, Yima is not a Muslim. Yima is a Christian. Dr. Adam.
Have you seen Alaji Yima before?
The iPhone, is it Geraldine or Antiesta?
It's Antiesta.
Oh, okay. All right, they want to fix tomorrow Monday's meeting at 8, at 9 o'clock. If that is fine, we'll do 2 hours.
9 in the morning or 9 in the night?
No, in the morning, because some people want to go and do Salaka.
AM.
AM,
Okay.
yeah. And please, if you guys have any